I hesitate doing this video, especially with the playoffs around the corner, but I'd be remiss not to talk about it, especially because of what's been happening in Las Vegas with the firing of their head coach, Antonio Pierce, and general manager, Tom Telesco. It certainly gives the impression that this team is looking to clean house and build for the future. And what better way to do that than by getting rid of your best asset and getting as much in return as possible, whether it be draft capital or through players or both. So, what does this article coming out of Las Vegas have to say? It says, report states that the Packers are named as the best trade destination for Maxx Crosby. Um, that's huge because can you imagine a world in which Jeff Hafley is working with Rashawn Gary on one side and then Maxx Crosby on the other? This article goes on to state that Crosby would be an ideal fit for Jeff Hafley's scheme. In addition to being a legitimate pass rusher, Crosby has the size, length, and play strength to handle the point of attack in the run game in a 4-3 defensive end. It's ideal fit for both parties, provided that the Packers general manager, Brian Gutekunst, is willing to take on the rest of Maxx Crosby's contract while giving up a significant draft capital with a win now move. Okay, so some of you might be saying, okay, so man, that's completely unlike Brian Gutekunst, completely unlike his character to go out and not only spend the money to get a guy like this, but also give up draft capital. We all know that Brian Gutekunst loves his draft capital, especially with the draft being in Green Bay this upcoming year. It seems highly unlikely that he'd be willing to part ways with a lot of that, but you never know. And here's the reason why I'm going to say that is because if you take a look at what he did this offseason, making two big splashes out there in the free agency pool, like getting and absorbing a contract like Josh Jacobs and taking on a 4-year, I think it was $48 million for Josh Jacobs. What a signing for the Green Bay Packers. What a signing for Josh Jacobs to a new life coming to Green Bay. And you already know the outcome of it. He's a Pro Bowl selection this year. That's his third time being selected to the Pro Bowl. But not just that, this dude has had such an impact on the success of the Green Bay Packers offense and the success of them getting to the playoffs and hopefully getting to the Super Bowl. Also going and getting a guy like Xavier McKinney and spending the cash flow to go and get a guy like Xavier McKinney. Obviously, the Giants weren't willing to match what the Packers were willing to pay. So it's not unlike Brian Gutekunst to go and make a splash. Could Maxx Crosby be that guy? Well, let's take a look at his contract. He signed a 4-year, $94 million deal, which is an average salary base of $23.5 million. He had a $13 million signing bonus. He has the signing through 2026, which means the Packers would get him for a couple of years, and they would have to absorb $52.8 million by taking on a guy like Maxx Crosby, which is an average of 26.4 over the next 2 years. So where do the Packers sit? Where does Maxx Crosby sit is when it comes to edge rushers and then his pay scale? Well, he's currently the 9th highest edge rusher contract out there. In fact, Rashawn Gary is slightly ahead of him as the 8th highest paid edge rusher with $96 million as a total value contract. Maxx Crosby has $94 million as a total value contract. I certainly think it's within the Packers realm. Let's take a look at where they sit on the books for cap space available heading into 2025. Total cap space of $226,700,000. They've got a cap space of $64.4 nearly million. And who knows what happens with Jair Alexander and freeing up some of that cash flow if the Packers decide to move on him. What a signing this would be, because you're looking at an NFC North that you finished third in behind Detroit, behind Minnesota, and you're asking yourself, okay, we struggled defensively, putting pressure on the quarterback throughout the year at times. So what a valuable asset going and getting a guy like Maxx Crosby. What a splash move this would be of a win now mentality. The Packers are already the youngest team in the league. I certainly think this move would make a whole lot of sense. Now, whether or not Las Vegas is willing to move on from him, whether or not Brian Gutekunst is willing to absorb the remaining $52.8 million of his contract. And then what would the Packers have to give up for him? I mean, maybe they could give up Lucas Van Ness and then a couple of first round picks or a second and a first or whatever. I think it would be, given the history we've had in our first round selections, it hasn't been great. So in my opinion, give up the next 2 first round draft picks. That's all good until the time that we are needing to draft another quarterback. That seems to be the time where our first round selections seem to make an absolute hit and a splash. That is my take on it. I would love to know yours. Leave your comments. And as always, go Pack, go.